Big Bill, it is 2023 and we are back and we're already having fun.
Man, it's always fun, and it has been a long break, but it was, as far as with the holidays and hunting seasons and everything else, man, it was nice to just get out there and be with people and shoot stuff and be with family and eat stuff. So good to be back here now, though.
Shooting stuff and eating stuff, that's always a good time. And we kicked it off right with we did podcast survey and we listened to our audience, and a lot of what they said was we want to hear from experts and biologists and people who know things about wildlife. And so we kicked it off with Dr. Brad Cohen from there in Tennessee where you're at. And man, he's an expert on many things wildlife.
That he is. I mean, he's been involved in a whole lot of studies over the last 15 years, really all around the South. But this work he's doing with waterfowl now and these transmitters, which technology has gotten so unbelievable, they're blowing the lid off of a lot of long-held beliefs about duck behavior.
Yeah, and for my part, I asked really kind of dumb questions from a guy who doesn't know ducks very well and contradicted myself sometimes. And so you get to really see someone who knows unpack those things and show you that just because you think a certain thing that maybe that's not true. So hope folks enjoy this one. We're already thinking on another one with Brad that I think people are really going to enjoy. He's an expert across many kind of mediums in the wildlife world and many different species. So we already have something in the works, and we'll just leave you there with that teaser. But enjoy this one from Dr. Brad Cohen out of Tennessee Tech. Since 1936, the National Wildlife Federation has worked with hunters and anglers to pass the most important conservation laws in American history and to protect our sporting traditions. This podcast explores our history, our values, and the work we do to safeguard the fish and wildlife that fuel our passions. We are NWF Outdoors.
What's up, everybody? After a pretty good hiatus here, Bill and I are well rested. Right, Bill?
Well, absolutely. Well
rested and ready to go on the new launch for 2023 on the NWF Outdoors podcast. And today we have a really cool guest. I'm looking forward to talking to quite a bit. And I hope, Bill, I don't derail you too much from all your waterfowl questions, because I know that's where you're zeroed in. And I was checking out this guy, and I saw some other really interesting stuff that I think is worth talking about. So I'll probably jump in here and there and try to get in a couple of those questions. But first, why don't you go ahead and introduce him? This is a guy from your state, or at least living in your state now.
He's here now anyway. We've got him and glad to. I mean, Aaron, as you and I have talked, this has been about the worst duck season I've ever had. I mean, 47 years hunting in Tennessee, and it was rough. The guy that we have on today, I watched on a presentation not long ago, and I've been kind of trying to keep up with the work as best you can, online. He studies ducks, mallard ducks, right in my area. So for me, obviously, that's a personal thing, and it's been a lot of fun to follow along. But I watched a presentation recently, and there was so much information that he brought out there. That's we got to get him on the podcast. And as you've mentioned, he also has turkey and deer research and all kinds of stuff. So our guest today is Dr. Bradley Cohen. Brad is the assistant professor of wildlife ecology and management at the Cohen Wildlife Ecology Lab at Tennessee Tech. And Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me today.
But Aaron, we always start with what have you been doing outdoors? So let's start with you. What have you been doing outdoors?
Yeah, since the last time we talked, I'm trying to think about what I have been doing outdoors. I suppose it has been a little bit of the normal winter stuff, skiing, hiking a little bit. I recently took a little bit of a vacation with my family, and we went down to the tropics. So I got a little ocean time, which was really nice, and did some snorkeling and caught a bonefish, which was really cool. So that was good. That's been my outdoor life lately. How about you?
Catching a bonefish would make for a good January or February, either one. Well, we've wrapped up duck season last week on the 31st. I'll be interested to see if Brad has any data on bird movement the 31st, because it was about the best I've seen since our freeze at Christmas. So that's kind of been my deal. Spent some time this weekend resting up, cleaning up, even cleaned some ducks that I'd been aging in the refrigerator and in my office basement here. And, that's been it. How about you, Brad? What's been happening?
Well, after duck season ended, I've got a pup. It's called the Poodle Pointer. It's like a versatile hunting dog, and she's a year old in January. And so I'm still trying to get her as much experience as you can. So I've been hunting pigeons just about on every farm I can, so it doesn't end for me. Now I've never gone really crow hunting. So now I'm trying to get into that to give her more retrieves. So that's my outdoors. I got a 4-year-old daughter too. Well, she's about to turn 5. And so pigeon hunting, she can come along too and boss the dog around. So it's been actually a good couple weeks here.
That's cool.
You'll have to share your favorite pigeon recipe with us.
Yeah, right. I think it's a lot of jerky and treats for the dog.
There you go. Those farmers need rid of them. That's for sure. They love to have folks out.
I was going to say it's the one animal you can hunt and almost always get permission on.
And they act a lot like waterfowl in the way they'll come to decoys and spinners and that sort of thing.
They make you feel good as a hunter. They make you feel like you know what you're doing. Although after, you take a couple volleys at them, they're not that dumb. They're coming at you, and then all of a sudden it's like they hear 2 or 3 shots and it'll slow down, they'll humble you too.
We'll be doing studies on them before you know it at the rate we're going.
Yeah, I'd love to. I want to become a better pigeon hunter.
Well, Brad, let's talk about you a little bit. I mean, we've talked on the phone some, and I mean, you're from New York, but you grew up hunting, and it's always been part of your life. And you said something, and Aaron will understand why this really got to me. You said, duck hunting and turkey hunting is what your life is all about. And, that always hits me because that's my 2 favorites. That's what I do and what I really care about. So tell us about Brad Cohen, where you're from, and kind of what got you here.
Bill, can I interrupt here 1 second? And it's a good interruption, I think. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say I forgot to say at the beginning that we did a survey of our listeners, and one of the things that they said they really wanted was wildlife experts. They said, we need more guys who know what's going on out there with wildlife. And so I just wanted to put a little plug in to say, we actually listened.
Well, I appreciate the title. I'll try and stick up to the wildlife expert standing. But listen, I came from Long Island, New York, and so Long Island I'm about an hour and a half from the city. I grew up in suburbia. My dad hunted and fished. I grew up hunting and fishing. People think New York, they think like the hustle and bustle of New York City, and suburbia everywhere is not that much different. But Long Island does have, weirdly enough, a lot of opportunity. People don't realize it, but it's an island, so saltwater fishing nonstop, deer everywhere. Nowadays, turkeys. Where I grew up, there weren't many turkeys, but up north, when it's deer hunting season, the Orange Army comes out and we're hunting. And so since I've been 10, I've been going up with my dad to upstate New York near Rochester, and hunting and fishing were my life. And so I knew once I graduated high school, it was time to probably go close to where I grew up deer hunting. And so I went to his college. I got into quote unquote better colleges, but this one college was literally 5 minutes away from where I was hunting. So I was like, that's an easy decision. I got my degree in biology, and I had a conversation with my stepdad once we were driving in the car. He goes, I was maybe a junior in college. I was in a biology major because I was good at it. And he goes, well, what do you want to do for a living? What do you want to do with your life? And I go, I have no clue. He said, well, where do you imagine having your first cup of coffee in the morning? Is it in the office? Is it in a cubicle? Is it in the woods? And I said, oh, yeah. It's in the woods. And he's like, well, there you go. That's what you need to do. Now, I do not recommend that advice verbatim per se, but all right. So I said, all right, I'm going to be a biologist. And I Googled white-tailed deer in a Google Scholar. a guy's named Carl Miller came up. I emailed Carl. He's at the University of Georgia. I said, here's what I am and here's what I do. Do you have any positions open for me? Wound up going there to University of Georgia, work on deer wound up being about 6 years, working on deer vision and deer disease work. And then switched over, worked with Mike Chamberlain for a while, doing turkey work and turkey habitat management. And then I had a kid, and I was on what's called soft money. So I had to basically do research and get my salary paid for through the research. And once I had a kid, I was like, that's over. So Tennessee Tech had a job open, and I've been at Tennessee ever since for about 5 years now.
Wow, I like it. Bill, I'm going to interrupt. Sorry. I know Bill's just dying.
He prepared all this, and you're just like jumping in. Okay.
No, that's good, man. It'll be dry if we just go with my script.
No, because I when I was looking you up, Brad, I saw this whitetail vision, this conversation, and that was enthralling to me. I saw stuff about hunting impacts on male turkey roosting. I see all these different things, and it's like, man, I feel like we could probably have 20 podcasts with you. And Bill's like, oh, I'm going to sit here and get my waterfowl stuff. So I got to make the plug in here once in a while to talk about some of this other stuff. And I'll let him start out with ducks, but I'm just telling you, I'm not letting you off the hook on a couple of these other ones. So get ready.
I've dabbled in a lot of different things. As somebody who loves hunting, I love the outdoors. Everything is interesting. And if everything's interesting, you wind up going in a bunch of different directions with it. But in the end, if you look through, underlying it is I want to be a better hunter. So I want to know how deer see. I want to know what impacts we're having on turkeys. I want to know what impacts we're having on waterfowl. So underlying it maybe is a little selfish. I'd like to know how to be better and make us better hunters. And so it brings you all over the sphere of different animals and different ways we can look at them.
And you're probably one of the guys that a lot of the hunters are like, let's see what this guy has to say, because he's looking at it.
I'm still a pretty crappy hunter. People ask until they see me go hunting. They go, "What did you kill this year?" And I go, "Not that great." And they go, and then the conversation ends. But I understand the science at least.
Yeah. There you go. Well, we need people who understand the science, because obviously most of we hunters we go try to shoot stuff and we listen to about half of what comes out, and then a third of that we put on the internet as fact, and that's how we get where we get sometimes. But I definitely want us to talk about turkeys at some point, because that's my other passion, and working with Chamberlain and your own work. There's so much cutting edge stuff in the turkey world right now. It's amazing. And Aaron, you've talked enough about deer. You had a whole series on chronic wasting disease. Come on, man. Anyway,
but seeing how whitetails see, is that not fascinating to you? I mean, I just caught a little bit of it in different colors and lights and putting them in troughs, and wait, I got to hear more about this.
No, I'm for it. That's good stuff. Well, let's talk about ducks, Brad. I mean, what got you started with this current study? When did it start? Tell us what the thought was and how you got it going.
So this study is kind of a collaboration by Tennessee Wildlife Resources Association, so TWRA for short. And the first part of it was also with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So what they did was, the original question was twofold. What are our ducks doing in Western Tennessee? That's an easy enough question. We can put some GPS transmitters on and kind of see what they're doing and flying around. The other question was a little bit more specific to what Tennessee and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have, which is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a good number of refuges in Tennessee, and actually TWRA has a lot of state-owned refuges. So the other question was, what role are these refuges playing on the landscape? Both if they're left undisturbed and we just use them, how are ducks using them? How are ducks relating them to them? And the other part was, what if we tried to get the ducks off of the refuge? What would happen? If we disturbed them and just got them flying? Everybody says, you go hunting for long enough and then you drive by a refuge and you're like, well, there are all the damn ducks. My God, well, we wanted to get them up and see what happened. And so that was the original idea of the study. And then it just kind of grew from there. Over time, there was enough buy-in to make it a much bigger project, looking at hunting pressure and food availability and water and you name it, we probably looked at it. But that was the origins of it. We put about 150 transmitters a year out for, now we're on our fourth year and we're going to be going to 6 years.
I would love to go along sometime when you're trapping and putting the transmitters on. I've never even been on a banding deal, so that would be really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Kind of what?
Actually, can I tell you, we're banding right now as we speak. My kids are banding ducks, and they have. People won't be able to see this on the video, but we have a pintail mallard hybrid that we're about to put a transmitter on. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Very cool.
All right. Anyway, sorry to go off on a tangent.
Oh, tell more.
That's good stuff.
That's fine.
That's I've killed one of those in my life, and it had the ugly aspects of both. Every other one I see is a gorgeous bird, But
yeah, I was thinking we're creating a pretty much a trophy duck. Like it's already a hybrid. Now you're putting not only bands on it, but a transmitter. That'll be a pretty cool one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of, what are some of the things? I mean, listening to the presentation you gave, y'all did some wild stuff as far as listening devices put out in areas and how you rallied birds. And hunters always say, if they just let us get on the refuges once a week, it would stop all this mess. And so y'all really worked at that. And how have you studied that and what have you found?
So when we put out these GPS transmitters, what you can imagine is it's like a little backpack. It literally is like a backpack. We strap it onto their kind of shoulders, and it's a solar panel GPS transmitter. So it's got solar panels, and it was recharging over time, and it texts us. It takes a location and it texts us the data. About every day we get an update of like, hey, here's where our duck is. And we're taking locations every hour. So we can go all the way, the duck can go all the way to Louisiana, Latin America, doesn't matter. It can go up to the Arctic Circle, which some of our ducks do. Doesn't matter. It's still sending us data. If there's cell service, we're hearing from it. All right, so what we're doing is we're collecting location every hour, and that's the primary part of the study. You got to understand that we have ducks in West Tennessee that are covering the landscape, giving us locations. At the same time, we did a couple things. We did aerial flights, so we flew a couple hundred feet above the air, and we just ran transects. And what we're doing is we're looking at how much water is on the landscape, and we're also looking at these blinds. Now, in West Tennessee, most people hunt out of stationary permanent blinds that are easy enough to actually, I don't know how a single duck dies by them, to be honest with you. You see them in the air when you're up in a plane. It's like, how many times do you have to see that ducks before you realize like that's not good for you? But what we can do is we can not only mark where they are, they're very easy to see, but we can actually see how often they're hunted because we can see the mojos flickering. So if a mojo's on, we know it's being hunted. And so first thing you want to first impact kind of cool thing that we didn't expect was on our study area, about even on like weekdays, we never had less than more or less 70% of our blinds being hunted in West Tennessee. On top of that, we have a really high density of blinds. We're talking a super risky area. Like on most of our study area, it's like one blind for every 50 acres. So these ducks are getting hunted, and they're getting hunted heavy all year round, or I guess the whole season. So we do that. The other thing we're doing is we are disturbing refuges, and we're seeing where the ducks go. And the other thing we're doing is we're putting out these recording units. These recording units just record ambient sound, but what we're using them for is we put them all around our study area, and we're counting the number of shotgun volleys. So if a duck comes in and someone shoots, it goes ta 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 pop pop pop. That's one volley, right? And so what we're doing is we're using that as a measure of like opportunity, or hunter opportunity. How many shots were taken in that day. And so we have duck movement, and we have the other aspect of it, which is like the hunter opportunity. So when ducks are moving, are they more likely to get shot? When we disturb the refuge, are ducks getting shot? Does that make sense? Did I even answer your question, or did I just meander around for a while?
No, that absolutely makes sense. In all of this, one other thing I want to bring up before we get past it is you talked quite a bit about, or not quite a bit, but some about ducks. The hunters all feel that ducks go nocturnal really quickly now. And you're saying that Can you explain a little bit how you're viewing nocturnal versus maybe how a hunter does, and if there's a difference?
Maybe I should be clear about this. So let's think about it. So let's go over some of the just general big point findings, and let me kind of feed into it.
Yeah.
The first thing we noticed was when we were putting these transmitters out, the ducks that we put transmitters on in Tennessee, they stayed in Tennessee generally the entire winter. They flew back in the spring up to the prairies, and then about 1 in 3, literally the next winter, was back in the exact same spot we banded them. So we're talking they flew 4,000, 5,000 miles total and wound up in the exact, I'm talking on top of dots on top of each other. Okay. That's part one. Another third of them generally come within about 100 miles or so of the area. And then another third just never, they kind of do their own thing. All right. So what we're seeing is once they kind of come down here, once hunting season starts, these ducks become very predictable. In other words, they learn really quick that if I do anything exciting or dumb, I'm going to get shot. And I only can make one mistake. One mistake, it's over. So what they wind up doing is most of the time, a little over 50% of the time, they only fly 2 times in a day. Once is to go out to feed, and the other time is when we bump them off of wherever they're feeding and send them back to the refuge. When we talk about nocturnal, I've always thought about nocturnal as being I thought ducks were exciting animals. You could fly, you flew thousands of miles here. Surely you're all over the place. And if you're not flying during the day, you're all over the place at night. You're jumping from one place, dabbling a little bit, and you're going to fly to another. And when you have an animal that's flying only twice a day, no matter what, they're not doing super exciting stuff at night. Are they feeding? Yes. Are they courting? Sure. Are they sleeping? Yes. But they're not up and flying everywhere during the nighttime. It's just not happening. Once the light turns off, they're really not wanting to do anything. What they are doing is they're being moved by hunters in the morning. So whenever that happens, whenever people are going into their blinds, they're being pushed off. And then they're leaving the refuge, about an hour or 30 minutes before legal shooting light. And just like any hunter will tell you, here they come. It's a minute after shooting light. They're plopping in. That's not nocturnal. That's just something that's kind of that's an animal that really knows to the minute when they're going to land somewhere. But that's it. They're not doing exciting stuff at night. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that clears up. And I thought that's where you were going.
I think I did a bad job of explaining that during the presentation. You're tight for time, but yeah, they're just not as dynamic at night as I would have expected.
Perfect. I mean, that answers a lot of the oddball questions that people had, that this doesn't make sense, because we all know we go into our place and kick them off and we get ready to leave and here they're coming. And it's
Let me think of it this way. Let me put it this way. If you were hunting the same day back to back, if you were quiet and able to get out of that area without spooking your ducks off, you're spooking those same ducks off in the morning. They're not trading back and forth. Those are there for the night.
Gotcha. Perfect.
What I thought about that presentation on the little part that I saw was all those photos of blinds you had, Brad. I was starting to think, maybe you should just take all the sticks and bushes off of your blind, because then it would look different. And they'd think maybe that's a safe spot right over there, because that one doesn't look like all the rest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Maybe make it look like it's an abandoned blind. Maybe they're smart enough to realize there's not possibly a hunter there. That hasn't been used in a while.
Or just wear bright colors and sit out there.
I've told people forever when they say that won't work anywhere else. I'm like, yeah, it'll pretty much work anywhere. Just make a thing that looks like a dozer pile that hides you.
100%.
Once you hide the people and the people's stuff, ducks they're not that smart. Like most wild animals, they aren't smart, but
it's amazing. People go, well, you're saying all these things about how they don't move and all this and how they're really not getting harvested. I'm like, well, yeah, but you're dealing with something where in our area, there might be 500,000 ducks. They have a pea-sized brain. They're going to make mistakes eventually. They can be a pretty sharp animal overall, but still make stupid mistakes on the day in, day out.
I like to say they're good at being ducks. They know how to do that. People would say chickens are dumb or these things are dumb. Well, I don't know if they're dumb. They're good at their thing.
Right.
That's right. I mean, the ducks experience down here experience so much pressure. You got to adapt very quickly or you're going to die, dumb or not.
Well, I'm sure going into this, and as a scientist, you try not to have expectations or
right.
That sort of thing. But
Right.
kind of as you've gone through this process to this point, what has maybe some things that have worked out as you would have anticipated them coming in, and what are some real surprises along the way?
Okay, yeah. So, I don't have any expectations when I do a study other than what I know I see with my own eyes when I'm hunting, especially, something like ducks where I hunt all the time. It's no surprise, like high energy resources like flooded corn, flooded soybeans for a couple weeks, rice, any of that stuff, and those agricultural seeds that are flooded, very strongly selected for, consistently selected for, especially at night. Okay, yep, would have thought so. Some of the stuff that I wouldn't have expected, well, where do I begin? The fact that they don't fly very far. Like, I don't think it's the same. By the way, I should make it clear, I don't necessarily think it's the same everywhere, right? This is West Tennessee. It's unique in kind of the fact that, like, intense management practices all around these refuges, but like it's not like Arkansas where like everything can be flooded on either side of it, right? It's very linear tributary system. So, okay, it doesn't work the same everywhere else. But the fact that like most of our ducks don't fly when they leave like the refuge, they don't tend to fly further than about 1.5 miles on average. Like, you're talking about an animal that just flew thousands of miles. I just expected them to be more exciting. I thought they were going to do cool things. And I watched, I thought they were going to hop refuges. 70% of our ducks use one refuge the entire time they're down here. I thought that they would keep going down to Louisiana. That's why our sample size was so high originally. I was like, well, if we're going to study what they do in Tennessee, we got to realize that they're going to head over to Arkansas, Louisiana pretty quickly. They don't. They like being here. They like what we're providing. They're here. And then just how many come back was astonishing. And then I guess the other thing was I had no opinion about the refuge system. I didn't care if it stayed the way it was or all disappeared, whatever was best for the resource, whatever's best for waterfowl. And you realize really quickly when you look at all these aerial photos and you look at everything, you listen to all the sounds, just how risky the environment is. And then like we disturb the ducks out. And what do? They don't fly over to, like, sure, you hear like after the first like you get them up and like you might hear like ta-tow, tow. Then it gets real quiet. And what we realized really quickly was these ducks aren't like going and landing in your decoys. They know that those are your decoys because they've been at that one refuge the entire season. They know you, okay? They know you're dangerous. So what do? They get scared. Truly scared. And what they do is once we leave, they just hunker back down into the refuge and then they don't leave for several days. It's like when like in Home Alone, when I watch a lot of Home Alone. I have a 4-year-old kid. I watch a lot of Home Alone. Like when Kevin gets scared by the people that are robbing him, he doesn't like run away to another house, right? What does he do? He screams and runs under his bed and just hides there, right? That's these ducks are doing. And so you start to realize like just how dangerous and how messed up it is for a duck. Like you're messing with their only safe area within miles. And they're like, just leave me alone, please. Like, this is all I've got.
Right. Something that's interesting to me when you say this, I mean, I don't know a lot about duck research, but I mean, I would think that everybody felt these ducks are pretty habituated to the habitat they like, right? Kind of before this, but sounds kind of like what you're saying is even more so. You're realizing it's not just habituation to a general area; it's habituation to like a 10-foot circle, almost. Really tight. Was that shocking to you?
It's habituation. Like an animal, like we have one hen that literally, we've tracked her for 3 years, and she goes back up north and back south and literally goes to the same spot, nests on top of her other nests. And you have like an animal that flies all this way and literally like her entire life is influenced by a couple property landowners. Like they need, it's too dangerous. We need consistency. I will go here every time. And like, if you mess with my idea of what is, first of all, the clear thing is like the limiting habitat. As a biologist, that's what I think about. Like, what's the limiting habitat to manage this resource? It's safe areas. Like they don't have enough of them. So if you mess with those safe areas, they don't just go like, oh, I'm going to leave. No, they're like, this is the only place I know that's safe. I'm just going to like hunker down instead because you just messed with my idea of what's safe. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
My big thing I hate is that y'all hadn't been doing this for 15 years because, like, Aaron, it's interesting to me because, like, where my blind is that Aaron spent a day with me last year, it's been there since the 60s. This property has been hunted since the 60s, although then it was buckbrush and cypress on the low end and green timber on the upper end. Now it's a soybean field. But what I think it's important for people to realize, of the 3 refuges around me, and all 3 of them you talk about, I know y'all work on, Whites Lake, Chickasaw, and Lauderdale. Only one of them was put in since the 60s, and that's Whites Lake. And the private properties around them, like you go to Lauderdale, just to the south, this old Cherry Farm and the Dyer Farm, and they've been there as duck hunting places since the 60s and managed that way. So it's... Man, I wonder if and this is anecdotal and there's no answer to it, if our hunting pressure over the last several years has just created this monster and made it worse.
I think that's what we're trying. I think that's what we're seeing is that, I'll try not to go on a long diatribe, but okay, you think about what we've done as hunters. Well, hunting has become more and more privatized. There's more and more money going into it. All right. You want to lease? That's an investment. You're going to use that investment. All right. So there's pressure it's not just like you hunting your buddy's land and go when you want. You've invested time, money, and effort into building that blind and leasing that place. You're going to hunt that thing. And so while people say hunter numbers have declined, they certainly have, but I don't think for ducks that the land area being hunted has. There's not a drop of floodable land that isn't being hunted nowadays. And you add that with mud motors and onyx and everything else, there ain't a secret spot left. There ain't a place to rest these ducks. And so, what we're seeing is that you have these isolated little subpopulations instead. So like you talk about, like you hunt around 3 refuges. Well, you're only being influenced by probably one of them right now, right? And so the next phase of our research is actually to add safe areas around, like rest areas, private land rest areas around all of West Tennessee to redistribute the ducks, to get a little more trading back and forth, to change things up a little bit so that you're not, so this triangle effect really is a thing versus this kind of, I don't want to leave where I'm safe.
Howdy, listeners. For more great content, check out NWF Outdoors social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Connect with us. We want to hear from you. Send us your ideas for podcast guests and questions in the comments.
And for even more excellent content, here's a message from our partner podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Ashley Chance from Artemis Sportswomen. We know you love awesome stories about hunting, fishing, and conservation, so head on over to the Artemis podcast. You'll meet adventurous, accomplished women who are redefining conservation through their lives in the field and on the water. Filled with humor, audacity, empathy, and intelligence, Artemis brings you new voices and introduces you to women from all walks of the sporting community. Find Artemis wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's talk about some fun stuff. When will ducks actually move? We had a big cold front at Christmas. I mean, how have different things made them move around?
All right, that was like the first, okay, again, selfish as a hunter. Like I asked my master's student, the first product we put out of this was like when are ducks flying? That was it. I was like, well, I want to know when ducks fly. And so the conditions that most ducks are flying on is right before a storm. Like the day before a storm rolls in. So when that front rolls in, on the edge of that front, they're moving, and they're moving significantly more. And those, even with our recording data, those are the days that most people have a lot of success. The other thing is when we get a really strong freeze and it pushes ducks out of the areas that they are familiar with, we don't necessarily see ducks moving more. They're not moving more. They tend to be actually more hunkered down, but what they are doing is selecting for different areas. What they're selecting for is like any open water, and that's going to probably be your decoy spread. The other thing is, what I thought was surprising is when the river gauge is out, like so when water's out, like we talk about, a backwater, our ducks aren't moving more, but instead they start selecting areas where hunters are more often. So there's better hunting on a backwater, but it's not necessarily more duck movement. Does that make sense?
That's so they're just following the water.
Yeah, they're following the water. And if you're on fresh water, if you're on new water or near new water, we think they're following new water. We're looking at it closer, but yeah. In the end of all things, like I don't necessarily know if like when are ducks moving is the answer to when you want to be out there, because if these ducks are so patterned, they could fly all over the place and they're not dumb enough to set in your decoys. It's different than like what's changing things up. When do we see the best hunting days? And the days we see the best hunting days, again, or after a big backwater after several days of freezing cold weather, or like right before a storm. Otherwise, it's the same day in, day out. Oh, the other thing worth mentioning is that our ducks are more susceptible to harvest in the evening than the morning. So in other words, like the afternoon hours, our ducks are and I think that makes sense, right? When most people in the blind is in the morning, and then they start they're not necessarily expecting you to be there in the afternoon, but definitely our ducks are more susceptible to it in the evening.
Okay, you're killing some ignorance myths for me right now. And so I got to ask about them. So I almost interpret this as you're saying like the ducks are going to do what they're going to do. And so like if you have your decoy spread and you're a good caller and all that, I'm almost interpreting this as like that doesn't matter as much as I thought it did. Is that it? Yeah, walk that through a little.
I might walk it back if that's what you're taking, because I don't know.
Go ahead, because that's all.
I don't know. Well, I think the ducks. I think you say like, oh, that's a good day. That's a bad day. That's I think the answer is like, it's a day that either push down new ducks, and what we see is that like we only get 2 big pushes in Tennessee, regardless of temperature. We get one in prior to the hunting season in November, and we get one right around Christmas time. It's almost like almost the exact same date, time in, time out. We don't get big pushes. So people talk about like, oh, it was stale until we got this fresh push of birds in January. Like we know from our GPS data, you didn't get a fresh push, but instead conditions did something where it changed ducks' predictable or habitual behavior. Does that make sense? So like, yeah. So like the second they do something different, the way I think about it is like, the intimate details of your house. I could blindfold you and say, get to the kitchen. You're going to get there. But I all of a sudden throw you out a couple miles from your house, or say, hey, now you got to get to the supermarket blindfolded. You're probably going to get hit by a car, right? Things aren't going to go well. So with a duck, the second you take them off their pattern, well, now all of a sudden, I'm not sure if that thing calling to me is a duck or my friend, but I'm going to check it out. Whereas before I knew it was a hunter. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
I've seen plenty of the latter for sure.
Right.
You were giving people like me who can't call or hunt ducks very well some hope, and then now you.
Anyone knows that you watch enough hunting videos, you would think that a duck call is like the magic voodoo stick of death. But everyone that knows that really hunts knows that like if you're on the X and you don't call at all, you're going to kill your limit. And if you're not on the X, you can call all day, and you're not going to scratch out any.
It's the place you are is pretty key. Or as Jimbo always said, there are 2 places to hunt. One's where the ducks want to be, and one's where they don't mind going. And the don't mind going is where you do have to be able to do a little bit of that stuff.
You work on them, right?
That's right. Well, okay, we've always heard things freeze up, ducks go south. True?
Yeah, somewhat true. So I guess what I should say is like in Tennessee, doesn't seem that true. Tennessee might be truly a wintering site. Like I always thought it was a stopover site. Like the ducks that were here were eventually patterning down to Mississippi or Louisiana or even Arkansas. And so like our ducks that when like we had that cold freeze this Christmas, you guys remember how cold it got? It was an Arctic blast. It was freezing. Our ducks, we had about 150 or 175, somewhere in that number that we had just tagged and we're monitoring this year. And only 9 of them flew further south than Memphis. Okay, so like only 9 of them flew further than about 50 miles south.
And it was 2 degrees in Memphis the morning after that.
It was freezing. Most of our ducks just stayed still. They just hunkered down, and we did aerial drone. We're doing drones as part of like drone surveys, trying to count ducks. And what we saw is there were tens of thousands, or in one place like 100,000 ducks, and where they were keeping water open. Like these ducks they were so packed in there that they were churning water And now if you let that freeze go on for maybe 4 more days, maybe they couldn't have kept that water, open, but they were keeping it open for 4 days of freezing cold. Now the ducks that were like further up than Tennessee, the ones we had tagged last year that were in, let's say, Iowa, pushed them down to Tennessee, but they weren't going much further south. They were done. Like they stopped in Tennessee. They didn't keep going. Does that make sense? So like at least in Tennessee, these freezing cold, they move ducks by pushing them off their habitual places. Again, it moves them around because they can't be where they want to be, but it's not pushing our ducks out and down to like Louisiana, let's say.
So it's not that we got a bunch of new ducks during that. It's that the ducks that were here were pressured by the weather to change locations and get off of their game a little bit.
It's both, and that's why the hunting it. I don't know if you guys hunted that. I'm sure you did. Like that was an epic time to be in the blind. It was both. We had a big push of the northern birds, and the stale birds that we had there were moving to new places and didn't know what was safe. If you were on any type of open water, whether it was Mississippi River or some kind of pumped place, you were going to do good.
And I will say they got stale immediately on the thaw. I mean, maybe a day and a half, and then it was over.
Yep. After the second that water thawed out, they went right back. A lot of our ducks that flew south, like those 9, 5 of them returned right back to Tennessee and went right back to where they started, and just like, all right, back to my normal routine. That was scary. Now I'm good.
Hey, these are all mallards, right?
All mallards. Now we do have a couple black ducks that we monitor, but mallards being a bread and butter duck, being so common, being what people want to target, and just being a good, robust animal to study is why we put out most of our transmitters on mallards.
So am I hearing this right then? Because I keep hearing things and I think I know, and then we keep talking and I maybe don't know the same. Am I hearing this right then? So you're saying the ducks that come down from prairie potholes in Canada and all that, they come to Tennessee and they stay in Tennessee. They don't go, okay, now I'm in Tennessee for a bit and now I'll go down to Mississippi.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what we're seeing is that our ducks that come to Tennessee do not go further south than Tennessee. They consistently come back to Tennessee. So we have stuff to hold them, and we have stuff to consistently keep them coming back.
So, but they still, so some ducks in Mississippi may have stopped in Tennessee for a couple of days, or no?
Yeah, sure. Well, what we're seeing is it's not necessarily like that. Like ducks, yeah, they do trickle down. Like there's a trickle, right? But some of our ducks make the migration like straight up. Like I mentioned that November push. Those are ducks that are like leaving the prairie potholes and just coming straight to Tennessee. Like they're not pushing down with weather. They're just like, it's time to go to my winter home. And I imagine Louisiana has the same thing, and I imagine Mississippi has the same thing. I imagine that every place has like a certain percentage of their ducks that just like that's their winter home. And then you get some that like, let's say they're Iowa, like they're tied up in like Iowa or further up, and then that pushes them down. And I don't think they're necessarily stopping down in Tennessee. Like, yeah, they might spend a couple of days, but then they just push right back down to Mississippi. Like they're on a mission. They're going to whatever their home is.
Yeah, you kind of busted one of my thoughts on this, because here in the West, when we talk about mule deer and elk in the spring, we have this thing we call following the green wave. Right?
Yeah, they follow the green wave.
Migrate as the grass greens up and the snow melts away. Yep. With my ignorance on waterfowl, right? I'm sitting there thinking that's what they do. They're it starts getting cold up north, and they push down a little further south, and they stop there for a while, and they push down a little further.
1 million%. That's traditionally what we thought, and we know that some ducks, no doubt, come down here early. But we would have thought a larger percentage of our ducks do that kind of stepwise ladder type progress down the entire flyway, but that's just not what we're seeing. And when I talk about these stale ducks, I think you're starting to piece together what I'm piecing together, which is the ducks that come here stay here, and they consistently come here, and they understand where the hunters are, and they only use a small area, and all of a sudden that's a recipe for stale ducks, and that's a recipe over a lot of years for consistently decreasing success despite populations being very high.
So that kind of explains, we always thought when we would get on one of these freeze-thaw cycles, where the hunting gets really good at this latitude when you get on that freeze-thaw cycle, well, it's pushed the ducks down. Well, maybe it's that it's just stressing the ducks, which were already here.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's what our GPS data, at least our GPS data, seems to suggest, is that basically if a duck was going north south all the time to this one field or two fields to eat, all of a sudden that field froze up. It's okay. Well, where do I go? And you're in your blind, and that's basically what the key to success is. So it speaks to the idea that like if we want success consistently, we can't manipulate the weather, but weather is like cold weather, those freeze thaws are what is going to make a good hunt season until we change something with actually hunting effort or hunting patterns. If we can't do that, then we just got to hope that Mother Nature pushes them off of their own patterns.
So do you have recommendations based on that, as far as like if you were to change something about the way we hunt them, what would you do?
Yeah, just if I was to, knowing the way the world works is that like you put in too much money. Most people put in too much money for me to be like, hunt less. A lot of people aren't going to do that. But the other answer is disturb less. Like stop kicking ducks off your property to get to your blind. Hunt, work the edges, work with your other, I think, these rest areas are going to talk to the idea that like these rest areas so far are looking really nice. Like these were areas that had no ducks, and this year we rested them and they had thousands of ducks. And the hunters around there were seeing those ducks and shooting those ducks. And so like this idea of like, they have QDM cooperatives, which is like, you're my neighbor, I'm your neighbor, let's all work together to do a quality deer management plan so that all of us can harvest decent deer. Maybe the future of waterfowl management is like, you're my neighbor, you're my neighbor, you're my neighbor. Let's hunt our blinds on the outer edge and leave the interior as a rest area for the ducks. Like that's how you get 4 small landowners to put a lot of ducks in an area. Maybe, I don't know, but that's where I could see a practical application of it.
Interesting. Well, before I ask you about similar studies in other states, I want to ask, are y'all looking at any point, and I had a buddy from East Tennessee said, please ask him this, are y'all going to maybe look at some of the other places in the state, especially East Tennessee, which gets a good black duck, or used to at least, good black duck migration?
Yeah, we would. So the short answer is not right now. We'd love to, and hopefully we'll work with TWRA to do that. We do have some transmitters out at Tennessee National, which is still Western Tennessee, but it's a more traditional flyway outside of or area to hunt outside of Nashville. We've transmitted about 20 to 25, which is nowhere near our sample size, but as in West Tennessee. But yeah, the goal is to eventually, like, maybe not to the extent and in-depthness of like what we've done in West Tennessee, but like do it across the state over time.
Gotcha. Yeah, we don't need to be spending a lot of money on grouse studies in the Hatchie River bottoms. So, you got to balance this deal out a little bit.
Right.
But I know Arkansas, Dr. Osborne's doing some work over there, then Paul Link in Louisiana. I mean, do y'all communicate and kind of stay abreast of what's going on?
Yeah, so Paul Link and Doug Osborne and myself, we all collaborate together. We publish together on different studies. We're working together on different studies on migration routes and survival, big scale questions, not just like, are they moving here versus there in Tennessee, but big questions about, how are they moving up and down the flyway? How does landscape attributes affect that? And it's been by having these type of collaborations, we can actually make very large flyway level decisions, or at least inform those decisions, I should say. And yeah, I mean, in general, what we find tends to be similar to what others are finding. Certainly I saw a presentation by one of Doug Osborne's students recently that like you could have changed the title to Tennessee and it would have been like same study. Now we're at the very beginnings of this type of technology. A lot of other studies are coming online now, and we'll see if our patterns hold. But I would think, fundamentally what we're talking about makes so much sense that it should be somewhat similar. Maybe the distance that they move is different. I don't know. But in general, waterfowl management has become such an intensively managed thing there's no reason to fly really far when there's really good food half a mile away from you. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I think it'll hold, but yeah, we're still at the beginnings of this.
Well, Bill, tell me when you're going to let me ask him other weird questions. You still got a couple more.
Go ahead. Jump in with something.
Well, I mean, I started looking at your work, Brad, and I saw stuff about coyotes. I saw stuff about turkeys and whitetail.
Yeah.
Give us what's some other interesting stuff you're working on right now in this field, and kind of maybe perks up the ears of our community.
Okay. So, all right, I'll just go through a couple projects that I think are cool. One thing we're doing is we're trying to estimate populations of what are called secretive marsh birds. Both we're trying to figure out where they are and how many there are. Maybe like rails, right? You can shoot them. You can shoot rails. We don't know anything about them. Yeah, we don't know anything about them. Right. And so how many people outside of Louisiana, maybe how many people are even hunting them? I don't even know. But there are some people that hunt them and shoot them in Tennessee. And so the idea is let's just get an estimate of how many there are. That's a cool one because we know nothing about them. We go into turkeys. We're doing a lot of work with turkeys. We work closely with Mike Chamberlain. So we're doing a lot of how does habitat management influence brooding success, nesting success? How does hunting pressure affect turkey movement, turkey behavior? How does season setting length affect gobbler harvest? So we're doing big banding studies and GPS studies. So that's informing state level management. One other really cool one that we're doing, I think, is we're working a lot with state agencies, trying to help them on their decision-making processes for season setting. That sounds boring to you and me, but actually it's the most tangible thing as a hunter you want to know is my state agency making the decision that is the best decision they can make based on the data we have for what number of animals we should harvest, when the season setting should be, all of that. And so that's not exciting. It's number crunching. I can't even stare at a computer like that, but my postdoc can. But the truth is what gets me excited is here's a real tangible thing that is going to influence population level management of our resource. It's going to make a difference. So that's the type of cool stuff we're doing. Was that a boring answer or was that a cool answer? I don't know.
No, you just kind of did the overview of a lot of different things. Maybe zoom in on one of those things and talk about some of the cool stuff.
All right, so I'll tell you about one study that we're doing that's cool. All right, so I'm working with computer science people here at Tennessee Tech, and I have a graduate student. He is a computer science major. In other words, he's getting an MS degree in computer science. All right, he can write up video games. He doesn't speak the language of a biologist. But what we're doing is I want to know just how much energy is, this is simplest level, but I want to know flooded corn. Oh God, people in Louisiana hate it. They don't even mention the word, as you work your way up north, okay. So I just want to know, can we classify how much flooded corn is out there? That's simple, right? But it's not just to be hey, look at the people in Louisiana. Look, there's no difference in flooded corn across the last couple of years. No, it's also if you think about it from a federal level, all the decisions at a federal level come down to wintering ducks need energy. And we're going to make you on a refuge put down this much energy because this is how much energy ducks need. And really, we don't know how much private lands contribute. So if I can get a computer scientist to figure out here's a satellite image, tell me where all the flooded cornfields are, I can say, hey, do we really need to plant that much food on a refuge? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know, but it has cascading effects. That's how you change federal frameworks. So yeah, it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but all of a sudden I have somebody working in computer science that's going to take a satellite picture and tell me how much energy is out there for ducks. It's a game changer.
My friends in Louisiana who I fight with all the time are going to love hearing that someone's actually considering this stuff because they're not,
and we're not alone. There's there's other people that want to look at the same things, and we're all approaching it for the best we can. It's hard to actually quantify okay, flooded corn is a grass in water. That's not easy.
Yeah.
That's why you have one single student who knows nothing about ecology, but can write algorithms all day, go and do it. And hopefully they come up with something neat. But I can't wait for the paper that shows whether or not how much flooded corn has been planted over time has changed versus how it's affected duck distributions. Very excited.
Good stuff. I know I had 3 acres of it 2 years ago, and we had about 10,000 ducks roosting on us every night, and they never touched the corn.
Really?
They roosted in it, but there was corn at the end of season still on there.
The other thing, I forgot to mention this, but we did some work with flooded corn, and we actually went in and sampled fields and looked at what affected use. And what we found was pretty clear. If it wasn't flooded about 18 inches or closer to the ear, you weren't going to get, they would use it for vertical cover, but they weren't going to smash it and eat it like you'd expect.
Gotcha. Cool. That's good stuff to know.
What about coyotes? I have to ask about coyotes.
What about them?
Yeah, I saw a study that you were working on, or that you had been an author on at some point. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember. It was something to do with.
Well, so I've done a bunch of stuff with coyotes. So we worked on a project with do coyotes affect I helped start a project that looked at like whether coyotes affect gobbling, or whether another one was like just coyote behavior, and another one was what are coyotes eating. So this was all during the time of like in the southeastern in particular, where I was at Georgia, like how many deer and turkeys are coyotes eating, and like is it bad, and what should we do about it? Coyotes are here. I'll summarize all the research, not just mine. Coyotes are here. Coyotes are never going away, and yes, coyotes eat everything, and it's compensatory probably. Like if you removed every coyote, something else nowadays would come in and eat what you're talking about anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Only in select areas where there's very low recruitment for deer should you worry about it.
So what about the gobbling? Do they stop them from gobbling? And
that works still ongoing, but the bottom line is the only thing that changes gobbling frequency is people. Like,
really?
I mean, that makes sense too. There's a reason they get up in that, when they're up in that tree and gobble and shut up. Like you look at some of the work Mike Chamberlain and his folks are doing, where like they look at an unhunted population and how many gobbles are there, and it's like perfect. It's like tons of gobbles across time, and then you compare it to a hunted site. It's like just a little bit of gobbles before hunting season begins, and then they shut up. It makes complete sense. Like you can only be chased by a hunter a couple times, and then you're just going to stop doing it.
It's amazing the difference in gobbling from a really well-protected private property when you happen to get lucky and get on one, compared to, say, a big public place you've been going to all season.
100%.
I have a two-part question as we get towards the end here. Number one, for hunters in Tennessee, is there anything they can do to help y'all? And number two, hunters other places who are hearing this and think, man, we need more of this where I am. What do they do, or what can they do?
So hunters in Tennessee, we work really well with all the people out there in West Tennessee. We're happy to come give presentations, talk to you guys about anything we can do. We're always looking to employ more areas into rest areas. Like, we're working with landowners for that. It's got some monetary incentive to rest your area. If they kill a transmitted bird, give the transmitter back to us, and we'll give you a replica. Like that transmitter itself is $1,500, but we'll give you the exact same one without the guts, free of charge. And we'll give you all the bands. We put special bands on our birds so that they can have that too. So that's how they can help us. Elsewhere, if you like this type of research, look, there might be other universities close to doing it. Otherwise, have your folks in your DNR call me, and we'll get a study started.
What about broader conservation, Brad? I mean, do you follow things like, we've got Farm Bill authorization coming up this year for the first time in 5 years. Are you kind of plugged into that kind of stuff?
So on an international or a national policy, the stuff we do feeds lightly into those decisions, right? Like when you talk about something like NAWAMP, which is the North American Waterfowl Plan, hopefully ours is speaking to this idea of participation and what opportunities look like. On CRP, we do turkey work, and we're working with, in Kentucky, for example, we're working in a lot of CRP areas that are quail restoration areas, and without obviously like brooding success is going to be higher there. That's probably clear as day. So like we'll inform that, but we don't work at a large national policy with anything actually talking to people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the things I always say, and it's kind of, I don't know, I say it too much, maybe, that I even forget that it means much, but just that habitat equals opportunity, right?
People don't realize that, I certainly didn't realize when I started. I thought I'd be working with critters, and I don't work with critters. I work with people. If I want to actually, I can do all the great science in the world, but 80% of my time outside of teaching and administering research is doing outreach, just presenting on doing these type of things where I can be like, here's the science. But the truth is, it's a dollar and cents industry. You work with people, and then they have to make some money off their land, whatever that is. Not, there's very few people that can just afford to put habitat on the ground. So what really happens, the real gravy, if you will, the secret sauce, comes from myself working with TWRA and maybe some people in the ag department here, or some other people that'll clue us in, and we talk about it, working with the USDA, and all of a sudden we're talking about incentives for people that actually farm or do timber management to actually put land into better habitat. That's where the real secret sauce is. You can do all the science in the world, but if you don't put the financial incentives in the right place, you're not going to make it. And it's all dollars and cents. People can't live on goodwill. Is that too preachy?
I think about it as like we kind of almost don't want to change animal behavior, right? We want to change people behavior so the animals
all you can do.
How they're supposed to act. Right.
It's a people. You can't change animal behavior, and you probably on a lot of animals can't do large scale landscape management if you're just a state agency that wants, like TWRA probably can't do really large scale habitat manipulations that would do it. Instead, what do they have? They have a season setting framework. They can change the bag limit. They can change how often you can hunt. They can basically shift opportunity. But the large scale things, like I look at myself in central Tennessee, there's a lot of pasture grass here. Well, we're working with USDA to try and look at like how can we add some kind of grazing rotation incentivization where during nesting and brooding season we're creating cover that is more optimal than a straight fescue field that's clipped down to a couple inches. That is how you make real change. Is that you see we're on the same page? Yeah,
I love it.
It's people.
Yeah, and we have NACA, we have Farm Bill and CRP, and we at National Wildlife Federation are really pushing the concept of the National Grasslands Act, right? Like,
I hope it goes through.
All voluntary, incentive-based, really incentivize, get landowners into this.
I might be the worst teacher to have because I come off as pessimistic, but I'm like, you know what? People need to make money. You need to incentivize good behavior or what we want for animals. And otherwise, it doesn't matter. But a lot of people don't realize that the incentives exist. Part of it is just education. Like you can knock on random, most landowners aren't just hunters and outdoorsmen. They're just people that want to have their back 40 and like hang out after they work a week in Nashville, right? And so even them understanding like, hey, there's money out there for you to do this. I think that makes a big difference. Or, hey, here's what decent habitat looks like and we'll help you do it. They don't realize that opportunity is there. If they realize that, I think a lot of stuff could change.
And those small land holdings in Tennessee now are just so important. And I'm a 55-year-old guy that grew up hunting bobwhite quail. My son's 22. He's never even pulled the trigger on one.
Sure.
And those small properties, as you're talking about, if you can get the grasses right and the cover right and make it work, that actually spells potential for them.
I mean, it's not rocket science. You don't need to give me a bunch of money to tell you like, okay, for every hedgerow that you remove, you're removing bobwhite quail habitat. And that I drive to West Tennessee on my way to go hunting, and like there's another field that's been joined together and they removed out the hedgerow. Like incentivizing something even as little as that goes a long way. And we all know it. A lot of farmers either maybe it's not dollars and cents smart, or they don't realize that the incentive programs exist.
Well, I guess we're coming up on an hour or so here. And I first will ask Brad if when we call in 6 months or a year and say, hey, can you come on again? Yeah. Hopefully you'll accept that invitation because I like your energy and there's plenty we could talk about, and there's, more of your studies and there's more of the other wildlife species. I would like to talk to you a lot about turkey and whitetails, and, Bill talks about that all the time. Out here in the West, we don't talk about turkey and whitetails nearly as much as y'all do, but we'll talk about that some more. But do you want to leave us with any wise words before we let you go here?
If you're interested in the research, we have a Facebook page. It's called Cohen Wildlife Lab, COHEN Wildlife Lab. You can look. We post stuff constantly on Facebook. We're happy to disseminate that information. The other thing I often say is I see too many people give the people that manage the resource a hard time. If you realize, as I do, the people that I work with them often enough to know that every single person that's managing the natural resources that we love, they have the best of intentions. They're just like us, and they're trying to do the best they can day in, day out. Understand that, and hopefully you'll give them less of a hard time. They're good people too.
Good one. And we'll put your Facebook page there in the show notes. Bill, you want to leave us with anything?
Well, sure. I mean, I'll kind of piggyback on that because I've been thinking it throughout this show. Every now and then I hear from hunters, the biologists don't hunt and don't care. The game and fish people don't hunt and don't care. Well, I can't speak for all of them all across the country, but we've had several on this show, and you and I both know a bunch of them, and generally they're about the most passionate sportsmen I know. And that goes from conservation officers to the biologists who are doing this kind of research. And I hope everyone heard that today. Recognize it and know it.
Good words. Thank you, Brad, so much for coming on. It was fun to have you. And I've already got a little idea. I won't announce it on air, but I've already got a little idea for something we could do with you in the future. Because
all right, sounds good.
Wide breadth of knowledge here. So,
okay. All right. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. Happy trails, gents.
For more great content, check out NWF Outdoors social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Connect with us. We want to hear from you. Send us your ideas for podcast guests and questions in the comments.
We are NWF Outdoors.